welcome to our conversation with the world's leading financial market futurist, Jason Schenker, on the topic of artificial intelligence, or AI. I'm Jonathan Bauman, a senior client portfolio manager with American Century Investments. Got the pleasure today to introduce Jason Schenker, a financial futurist who is the chairman of the Futurist Institute and the president of Prestige Economics. Jason's written 36 books on emerging technologies, business strategy, finance, and the economy. Bloomberg News has ranked him number one in forecasting in the world in 26 different categories since 2011, which is why executives, corporate boards, industry groups, central banks, and governments rely on his research. Jason's given over 1,000 speeches, and he's been ranked LinkedIn's top public speaking voice and top economics voice in 2023. Jason, welcome. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's great to be here with you.
Great. Well, let's dive into our questions. But before we get to the topic of AI, I'm really interested in learning more about what exactly is a financial market futurist.
Oh, this is a great one. I get this question a lot. I mean, I think the biggest thing is by training, I'm an economist. And so I look at financial markets and I'm forecasting various things, FX, interest rates, macro policy, commodity prices, and the like. But over time, what's developed is a client need to look beyond the 24, 36-month window for what certain currencies or commodities are doing. They want to know what's going to happen long-term. What does that mean for my business today? And so my forecasting work and all the work that I do in finance has gone from being purely in the economic financial market near term to being more looking at a lot of longer term things as well as the near term market dynamics. So that's what I see as a financial market futurist, where you're looking at these longer term trends, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years out, but you're also looking at what's going on with financial markets now and what could that mean in the future.
Very interesting. I think that dovetails nicely to the topic of conversation today, right? Which is artificial intelligence.
Absolutely.
Obviously, it's captured the imagination of and the attention of the public and business leaders since the launch of ChatGPT about a year ago. It's also a topic many of our clients are interested in, as you can imagine. So in your research, I understand that you frame discussions of artificial intelligence in three ways. So what are those?
There are, in my mind, three different ways to think about artificial intelligence. And the first is the software side, right? If we think about predictive analytics, something that I studied in grad school, I can't believe I'm going to say this, 20 years ago, that was really a key part of that, right? And we've seen that develop in finance over the years. The software piece, trying to be able to predict things with lots of data, that's the software element. Then there's what I'd call an integrated hardware and software element. Think about robots in warehouses. They're picking and pulling things that we order online with e-commerce, and they're doing things faster than any humans could. And they're using both software that helps them do these actions, and it's also hardware, right? So the robots don't act independently. There's Terminators out there rolling around, right? Not yet. But right now, the way it works is all these robots are integrated with this software, and they're doing different things. And of course, in manufacturing lines, you have them integrated in a way in manufacturing where some of it is predictive, where some of it is what we call really, truly artificial intelligence. But it's still an integration of hardware and software. And then there's the third piece, and this is where ChatGPT dropping on the scene was so impactful, right? Because the robots have been in manufacturing for decades and in warehouses for many years, and the software has been around for decades. But ChatGPT is something new, a generative AI that allows you to have a more conversational interaction with an AI to create and generate new things. And it is software-based, but it's not just purely data, purely analytics. It's something more. And that's what's captured the imagination. So as I think about the kinds of AI, I see it really is tied into a number of different areas of automation and robotics, but the ChatGPT element, that's really what's new.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's obviously rapidly reshaping the investment landscape and altering how we make investment decisions and manage our own portfolios. You look at this year, companies that provide the computing horsepower to build AI tools, or the large cloud computing providers themselves. For instance, those stocks have all surged, right? So as you kind of look into the future, what next level AI opportunities do you see in maybe other parts of the economy beyond technology?
I think there are a lot of opportunities for productivity gains, especially looking at the year that 2023 has been, where some of the most recent labor market data shows that there's still around 9.6 million open jobs in an economy where there's only 1.8 million people collecting unemployment, right? That means there's a lot more open jobs than there are available workers. Well, that means you need productivity levers, because here we are, the end of 2023, for most companies, it's easier to hire than it was at the end of 2022. But it's not easy, and finding talent is difficult. And companies want to grow, even though there are high interest rates and other pressures. Companies have a mandate to still boost corporate profits and find ways to drive new levels of activity. How do you do that? Well, one of the ways you can do that is with technology, right? There's only 3 levers of economic growth, right? The solo growth model, right? There's capital, there's labor, there's technology. Capital right now, not as favorable with higher interest rates. Labor, pretty tapped out. If you've got 9.6 million open jobs and 1.8 million people collecting unemployment, the shortfall's massive. So what's your only lever left? And that's technology. So if I'm looking ahead, I'm not just thinking about technology pure plays or the pickaxe and shovel business where it's providing some of the hardware and leverage to make sure that the generative AI can function. I'm also looking at the third element, which is broader general productivity gains across the economy. And I think there's tremendous opportunity there. As an investor, what does that mean? Well, that means that there's probably going to be, in many companies you invest, a big mandate towards more technology, more AI, and that means workers are going to be doing more. It's not that AI is likely to replace all the workers, right? In the same way that, remember when they said email was going to make every office paperless, and then suddenly every office was producing more paper than ever?
People are printing their
Right?
emails, right?
People are printing the emails, right? Same thing I see here with the AI element, which is, well, we've got this new technology and it could just take away all the jobs. Or we could give the AI to our workers and have them all produce more work than we ever imagined possible. And that's where I see the potential benefit. And that's something that, if we're talking across the broad economy, a broad range of index funds, there may be opportunities across the board for productivity gains.
Yeah. So more of a tool than as a replacement.
Absolutely. In the same way that Lotus 123, which eventually became Excel, well, didn't become Excel, it gets replaced by Excel, right? You get digital spreadsheets, and then you have another version that follows on. And that became a huge tool, a huge lever for finance. It's not that you suddenly didn't have people working in finance. It's just maybe now you had fewer errors and you had better record keeping. And now you had people in finance doing way more stuff than you ever imagined. And I know it would be a lot more difficult to do what I do without Excel, right? As I'm sure would be true for everyone in finance. And that is sort of the value I see coming from a generative AI, coming from something like ChatGPT, where now you think mid-office, back office, they're going to be able to do stuff never imagined possible by the sheer volume of what that can give as a lever.
No, that's a great example. So, how are investing decisions becoming increasingly influenced by new technologies like AI?
There are a couple of different ways that I see new technologies impacting investing. The first is there seems to be an annual hype locust wave that tends to hit markets. If I think back to, say, the end of 2021 going into 2022, it felt like it was NFTs and Bored Apes. And that's what everyone was talking about. And that's the story people ran with at the end of 2021. And throughout the beginning of 2022, everyone went nuts for NFTs. If I look back a year before that, I feel like Bitcoin and crypto was part of the big thing. So going at the end of 2022 into 2023, AI was the big thing. And of course, all year long, investors have been trying to figure out where can we allocate funds. CEOs have tried to figure out where can we implement this? Where can I talk about what we're doing related to this? What can we do to boost our productivity and also our visibility around this? Corporate boards are trying to figure out what is this? What is the value it brings? How do we increase shareholder value by tapping into this, right? These are all the questions that executives and boards are trying to tap into, following a huge media swell and then hype locusts that just come along and swarm and are looking to plop lots of cash in the area. Now, will that be just AI again in 2024? I don't know. I know our attention spans can be quite short, Jonathan. So like if something in the next 6 weeks comes up and it's an entirely different thing, I don't know what it's going to be, quantum computing or something else, and then that becomes the hype locust topic for 2024 that the little kid soccer team of investing is trying to chase around, I wouldn't be surprised. But unlike the NFTs and the Bored Apes and some topics around crypto, I think that AI and technology in general have now got a bigger amount of mental real estate for both executives and for investors. I don't think that's going away. And the notion of trying to get more productivity from the workers you have in a labor force that's extremely tight right now, if you're trying to hire in that kind of labor market, even with near record labor force numbers, even with record payroll numbers nationally, I don't think that's going to go away.
Yeah, that's great. So tell me a little bit about how you see companies adopting AI in their businesses. And right, this isn't going away.
Yeah.
Companies are already looking at it. What are some of the ways you think they're going to adopt it?
This is a fantastic question. And I remember giving a talk earlier this year to a group called ALAN. It's the American Logistics Aid Network. And it's a group of other industry groups in supply chain and logistics. They had come to me and said, what can we do with AI? And I made a list of things we could do. And then the call I was going to have with them was at 10 a.m. Central. I'm based in Texas. And at 9:10 a.m., I decided I would spend 20 minutes and see what I could do with ChatGPT between 9:10 and 9:30 and what I could whip up out of my list. And there are things I'd done before. I've done similar things with sales scripts and other things. But this time I did something that was very corporate. Let me give you an example, because this example in the story will probably enumerate how companies can use this. First thing I did was imagined that I own a company with multiple warehouses, and I want to put in some of those robots I talked about earlier, the robots that would do picking and pulling of different things. So first thing, a job description to hire a new CPO, a chief procurement officer for my organization that's used to working in organizations with multiple sites throughout the country and working with these robots, right? Boom. Within a few seconds, ChatGPT has a job posting. That's one example. Next thing I said was, well, I now need to do an RFP, a request for proposal, so that I can have companies bid on this work. So I had ChatGPT write me an RFP for a company with multiple warehouses and requesting to do an automated guided vehicle, AGV, those are the kinds of robots moving around warehouses, an AGV implementation project across multiple sites. Draws up 3-4 page proposal in seconds. So now I'm also going to be the CEO of a company that does these implementations. Now write a letter of proposal from me as the voice of the CEO of this company that does these AGV things. So now in a few seconds, it writes the full letter of proposal, right? Full thing. It talks about my interdisciplinary team that doesn't exist. Talks about what great experience we have doing multi-site implementations, right? It says all these great things about what a variety of companies we've worked with and what success we've had. Company doesn't exist. So the next thing I do is I ask ChatGPT to write me a legal draft of a contract with myself. And, in case I don't get it right, I tell ChatGPT to put in standard dispute, arbitration, and mediation clauses. It doesn't. I'm not a lawyer. I did do a master's in negotiation and conflict resolution with a bunch of alternative dispute resolution courses, and it looks okay to me. Again, it's a draft. So I would be willing to sign this contract with myself. I then said, what I'd like you to do is write up a shareholder memo telling the shareholders that this is going to happen. Writes up a shareholder memo talking about this great AGV project we're going to do with a company with tremendous track record and multinational experience doing multi-site projects. Fantastic. Then I told it to do 2 press releases. One from me as the company hiring the implementer, and then one as the implementer who's been hired. I also told ChatGPT to include theoretical quotes from both myself as the CEO of one entity and the other. Writes up these beautiful press releases. I wouldn't have changed a thing. Then I tell ChatGPT, now that this is great, but the project's now moving forward. I need a project plan. I need a 12-month implementation plan with stage gates, milestones, resource requirements, staffing, everything enumerated for this project. It writes me up 7-page project plan for the next 12 months. What are the milestones, the people, the everything? And then the last thing I tell it to do is, because I'm from Texas, to send a thank you email in Texas dialect, 2 paragraphs long, from the implementer of the automated guided vehicle project to the company that hired them. And it wrote it, howdy y'all, thanks for the thing, right? Like it wrote the whole thing up. But it made one mistake. In that whole period, I did all that in 20 minutes. The Texas email was 3 paragraphs long, and I told it to do 2 paragraphs. Everything else I could have hit send on and would have been very comfortable with. That kind of mid-office and back-office function is where we're going to see the impact. When I worked at McKinsey, the kind of project I've just described to you would have been a 2-week-long project. Probably manager plus a couple people, might have been $500,000 or more to a client. I did that for free in 20 minutes. That's where you're going to see a lot more leverage going forward, where companies are looking in their mid-office and back office, what can we do? And I think the litmus test for opportunity is a question. Is there anything you do in your job that you would describe as standard or boilerplate? If so, there's probably an opportunity, at least for a first draft, for a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, how many shareholder memos have been written in the history of the world? How many job descriptions have been written? How many press releases, right? So if we think about what has ChatGPT been trained on, there's an infinite number of these things. Doing something creative, that's going to be tougher.
That's a fantastic example. Thank you for going through that. Very impressive.
Happy to share.
So, how do we translate then what that means for investors?
For investors, I think that there are a couple big pieces. And I think one is, first of all, being aware that there's a productivity upside across the entire economy. 2, businesses need to be looking at where they can use the leverage of AI. If you're making investments in individual companies, they're not looking at this, they're really missing out. The other thing is, if we think about it, smaller businesses now could seem a lot larger than they are, because now you might not need as many, like if you're scaling up a business, you may not need as many people to be staffed in certain functions initially to kind of get the same ramp up you would have gotten in the past. Because now you can generate a lot more of that content that is standard, that is boilerplate, and allocate your staffing more efficiently. So you may see companies that are in the tech side especially see even faster growth as they're coming up and emerging. That's a good sign. There's also probably big opportunity on the private equity side. Private companies, they may not be as aware of these things as some of the big public companies. Tremendous opportunities could be found there as well. And I think that mix of thinking about the broad economy, watching the individual companies you're investing in, seeing if they have a strategy, and then also being aware that private equity or new and emerging companies have opportunities. I think those are the 4 ways where I see the investment potential.
Very interesting. So let's maybe go to the other side of the coin, right? We've talked about
Sure.
It's great productivity enhancements and all the positive things, but our own analysis has identified a number of potential risks and unintended consequences that can be associated with AI. And I understand you categorize these into 3 big risks around operational, social, and intellectual property, or IP. Maybe we'll take those one at a time.
Let's
start
do
with the operational risks. What are some of those risks that you see out there?
So the biggest operational risk is if you have over-reliance on something like ChatGPT or an AI to do all the work for you. If you've never written a press release, you've never drafted a contract, you've never done a project plan, how do you know if one is good or not? right? In the same way, the example I'll take from before, Lotus 1, 2, 3, then Excel, they replaced doing math by hand. I don't remember the last time I did long division, but I certainly know if an Excel spreadsheet has 1,000,000 divided by 4, the answer isn't 12, right? Like I know I can spot a glaring problem. And that's probably the most important piece, is that you can eyeball something and go, wait, that doesn't look right. What this means is, especially if you're training younger talent, newer talent at any rate, folks are coming into a role, they haven't been in there before. You have to make sure they can do it on their own without aid. This also presents some challenges in education spheres as well. How do you test students if they have the ability to use ChatGPT to generate all their stuff? That's going to be a real challenge as well. That means maybe all your schooling is remote, but then you got to go get those blue books when it's test time and you got to come in and you got to write it by hand. So now it's really the testing that becomes more important. Doesn't matter how you learn it, but you have to demonstrate that you can do the work without the computer. In the same way, we all learn various kinds of math, right? Whether it was calculus or whether long division, like whatever through our lives, you have to be able to demonstrate you can do that first without the aid of Excel or calculator, because you have to spot glaring errors. So I think that risk of error proliferation is going to be a bigger problem.
And we've heard this term hallucination, right, from ChatGPT or other generative AI tools where they give you a very confident answer, but it's not necessarily the correct answer.
Oh, and this is a great one. And I know, because I do a lot of things in the public sphere. I asked ChatGPT about myself, and it told me I have degrees I don't have from universities I've never even been to. I've worked at places I haven't worked, and I've written a book that no one has ever written. So it can extrapolate from data and say, well, this looks plausible. That's where you've got to be careful. And of course, because ChatGPT doesn't have access to current data, well, that can cause problems too. If it doesn't have current information, you may be off on some simple things that might matter a lot. But if you need something that's current, if you need to make sure it's accurate, that's where you need to rely on more than just that. It's a tool in the toolkit, not the only thing. And everything does need to be double checked. And in the operational side, this means things like quality control, QC, become much more valuable. It's in that control piece, that review piece, where you suddenly have even more. It's already an area where you add a lot of value. Now it's an area of even greater value. You can have first drafts drawn up all day long. You have to know what the finished product needs to look like in order to get it really right.
All right, let's talk maybe about those social risks then.
Let's do it. The biggest risks here really are that we end up, unfortunately, codifying biases. That what we've seen historically in the data where there may be different biases suddenly become codified and proliferate. That's a really big risk. There are a couple others as well. One is that you could also see AI potentially become dumber. And then the quality goes down, and now you have ripples across business. Productivity doesn't happen and things are an issue. An example of this would be in March of 2023, the ability of ChatGPT to predict if a number was a prime number or not was around 97, 98%. Around June or July, that percentage, based on a Stanford study, it had fallen to 2 to 3% ability to predict it. So to go from 97, 98 down to 2 to 3 is a really big drop off. So there's a risk you end up with garbage in, garbage out. And that's true with the biases. That's true with it somehow learning the wrong things. Those are really big social risks. And there's a third one, which is maybe not as high in order as those, but is also important. And that's everything becomes dull. Even now, I'm sure recently you and the other folks that are on this call have read something recently and thought, wow, that I just read a lot of words, but I feel like I got nothing out of that. That was really boring. And I'll tell you, as someone who frequently writes articles, I have very often asked ChatGPT, I'm writing an article on a topic. I want you to write 7 articles on this topic, 700 words each. Every one of those articles will speak much, but say little. There's nothing unique in them because they're drawing on a repository of lots of information. Nothing unique, nothing distinctive, nothing funny, no anecdotes, nothing that we would describe as human. They are all garbage. But sometimes one of them has a really nice structure that I'll like. And of course, why does it have really good structure? Oh, well, it's drawing on an infinite repository of lots and lots of different articles. So sometimes I might follow the structure and not keep a word. But many people may just decide, oh, I just wrote the article for me, the 700 words I'm just going to hit send, and it sends in drivel. That's a risk. Suddenly, you don't just occasionally see an article where you're like, wow, I just read that and learned absolutely nothing. What happens if that proliferates and everything becomes dull?
And then the new models are trained on that information, and then
And
it's
you
a
get
vicious cycle.
It's a vicious cycle of absolutely nothing. And that becomes a problem too.
Got it. And let's touch on that third risk now then, intellectual property or IP.
Yeah. This is a really big problem because even if companies tell their people, don't use ChatGPT, they're going to use it. They are using it right now. And to break the fourth wall, your people are definitely using ChatGPT right now, even if you've told them not to. And the point is, when they do this, they could be putting in code, they could be putting in legal terms, confidential agreements, they could be putting in all kinds of IP. That's a really big problem because now what you have that's secret and proprietary to your business suddenly goes into the big brain of everything else, and now it's everywhere.
Yes, maybe carrying that a little bit further then, what's your recommendation on how businesses and individuals can protect themselves from any of these three risks, but maybe especially that IP risk?
And this is a tremendous question, and that real answer really is train your people to be greedy with AI. They're going to use it. Just let them know, they have to know not to share contract terms, confidential agreements, anything that's IP WIP, anything that's a work in progress for intellectual property, anything like any lines of computer code, cannot share anything like this. Be greedy. Use it for whatever you want, but just ask it for stuff. Just take from it. And if you're worried it'll disclose who your clients might be, great. Tell them they have to use generic examples for everything. What was it in the old Looney Tunes day? Everything was Amex or Acme.
Yeah.
That's it. It was Acme, right? That there was, that's the example then, right? That everything is Acme Co. Whatever it is, you are not to put in the companies we're actually doing business with.
Sounds like good advice.
Yeah.
So, we've written a series of articles this year ourselves on AI, and one of those we discussed the coming labor shortage and especially developed economies, and as a result of the aging global population. So, in that context, we argue that AI could have tremendously positive effects. And I think you touched on some of the reasons for that in our conversation. Specifically though, you wrote a book in 2017 titled Jobs for Robots.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the subtitle of that book,
Yeah.
and then AI's potential on the labor force.
Yeah, this is a great question. So the book was titled Jobs for Robots. The subtitle was Between Robocalypse and Robotopia. And the robocalypse is this sort of fear that is often out there. Robots are going to take all the jobs. Automation is going to take all the jobs. None of us will have any work to do. And in the same way that Microsoft Excel didn't take all the jobs, or construction equipment hasn't stopped construction from happening, right? There's no one out there who works in construction who wishes they only had shovels, right? Any new equipment leads to new productivity. And so the robocalypse, which is often a narrative as a fear-mongering around technology, it doesn't hold water if we look historically. Every technology has always added more value. The robotopia, which is this sort of techno-socialist idea where the robots do all the work and we all live a life of wealth and leisure, I think that's also a stretch too, right? And that seems unlikely because for a few reasons, right? People need things to do, right? And what is it? Idle hands, the proverbial statement is idle hands to the devil's workshop, right? And people need to be doing things, and they will always probably need to do things. Otherwise, society will likely suffer the consequences. But I don't see either one of those things happening, because there are a few things in human nature where people like to be busy. They need to be busy. But if you want to make sure in individual cases, will there be jobs lost? Yeah, that's going to happen. And in individual cases, will the productivity gains have significant benefits economically for society as a whole? Absolutely. Does that mean I think the robots take all the jobs and no one has a job anymore and everyone's impoverished? No. Do I think the robots take all the jobs and everyone's just gloriously wealthy? I don't believe that either. No matter how much technology you have, there will always be differentiating factors. And I think that will persist, because in my mind, we live in a Rousseauian world. There's a limited amount of stuff. Because there's a limited amount of stuff, even if we increase productivity, we're not going to end up with even distributions, right? The biggest defense, though, to make sure you don't end up on the robocalypse end where your job just goes away, the biggest defense against that as an individual is education. And the more you learn, the more you earn. We see this every year. The Bureau of Labor Statistics in the United States produces a chart of different education levels and unemployment rates and wages. And what we find is that for each incremental level of additional education, people earn more money. For each additional incremental level of education, people are less likely to be unemployed. So there's a positive correlation with earnings with more education and a negative correlation with unemployment. So who doesn't want to have more money that they're making and a lower chance of being unemployed? Well, everybody wants that. So the answer to that's education. The more technology that we have, the more you're going to be learning even more along the way. And so the idea that I have a college degree, it's enough, or I have a graduate degree, it's enough, it's probably never going to be enough going forward, because we're always going to have new technologies we're going to have to learn, we're going to have to be able to use and implement. That will drive productivity gains, that will drive economic growth, that will drive a broad-based wealth creation. And on the individual level, the people who embrace that notion that they have to be learning new skills in formal and informal education settings in order to be moving up the ladder, those folks will come out on top.
That's great. Now, we had our audience submit some questions when they signed up for this.
Of course.
So if you don't mind, maybe we'll address a couple
Let's
of those.
do the thing.
So one question that's very top of mind for financial companies like ours, but also our clients, is regarding AI regulation.
Sure.
How do you see government regulation playing out in this space, and what are some of the challenges maybe of regulating AI?
We are going to see more regulation for sure. There was an executive order out of the White House in October about a number of different things related to AI. Some of these things related to national security and competition and various other things as well. In the finance sphere, I would expect the regulations to be focused where they very often have been for finance, and that is consumer protection and data protection. There are many things financial companies do with data, even now, very advanced kinds of algorithmic trading and various different strategies. But if individual retail consumers get hurt, the regulators show up really fast. And that will, I think, always be true. So one of the things about being a futurist is I'm often looking at long-term trends of the past, data of the present to craft a vision of the future. So long-term trends of the past show regulators show up if something bad happens to consumers or if consumers are at risk. And that's their top priority for protection. I would suspect going forward, consumer protection, data protection will be really critical. And we see the number of, cyber fraud scams, spoofing, especially we see, all these robocalls and things where they try to scam folks, give them the social security number, try to get their bank account information, right? I've had relatives who've been scammed. They get someone calling up, pretend to be someone else, and you've got to go send us gift cards in the mail, which doesn't make any sense, but right to you or I, but to some folks, well, maybe I have to do this now. The kinds of consumer risks with increased technology become exponential. And so the regulation around that and the oversight will need to increase, again, always with that forefront of mind goal, keeping consumers safe, keeping the markets and financial institutions safe for retail investors. I think that will be the trend going forward. Now, could there be all kinds of other stuff? For sure, that could happen as well. But if you ask me what will most certainly seem like with a very high probability of likelihood, regulators will be watching out for consumers and data protection will become even more important.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting too is even the technology companies themselves are saying this needs to be regulated, right? Which is sort of atypical.
We are seeing that. There is, though, a question. Are they saying we should be regulated to prevent new startups from coming up? Because if you put a big regulatory burden in an industry, it's tough to start a new business. And we see this in many fields. And around technology, that would favor incumbents that are already large, that already have a lot of money, that already have large compliance staffs and all kinds of folks focused on different regulations. But if you're starting a new business and there's all these regulations, it's kind of tough to get started. So there's a question. Does that favor the incumbents or does it protect the people? And the answer might be yes, that it does both, right? But we'll have to see how that plays out.
It's interesting. So maybe this is another question we got from the audience. I think it's best summarized as what's next. But the question is, where do you see the biggest opportunities for artificial intelligence in the coming years?
Yeah. So there's a number of different areas where finance has lots of opportunities for data, lots of opportunities for AI. We've already seen data in algo trading for a long time. We are beginning to see it. We've seen it in recent years in audit. You're going to see more of it. Again, thinking about audit and compliance, testing and sampling. Well, it's a lot easier to do it if you can have software have a much bigger sampling size. It can do the testing a lot faster. And we're not just talking about with digital records, even using drones to do an evaluation and part of an audit of physical plant, of physical structures, right? Those kinds of things, making sure that what you say is there, right? Making sure that you have assurance in an audit process, that's really important. We've seen some of that. We're going to see a lot more of that going forward. The other thing that's next, I think, is that quantum computing is going to bring a new level of computational power to bear. And we're beginning to see that now is commercially being rolled out, but you're going to see it much more widely available. And I think we are going to see tremendous value for quantum computing technologies in a few fields. Finance is one of the highest value. The thing people need to know, of course, is that finance is almost always at the forefront of technology, because if there's an industry where there's going to be an ROI, finance is usually one of the biggest, right? Because you're dealing with money and finance. And so most computers, smartphones, tablets we have, almost all of them in the world, are what we call based on Alan Turing's machine, right? The machine that cracked the Enigma, the Nazi code machine in the Second World War. So they're Turing machines, classical computers. They operate on a deterministic, non-probabilistic basis. In other words, you ask a computer that operates in this way, 2 + 2, and it'll tell you that's 4. Quantum computer is not going to know the answer. Quantum computer does something different. Quantum computers operate on a non-deterministic, probabilistic basis. So if you asked it, how many chickens could you fit in the lobby of this building? It's going to give you the answer with the most likely probabilistic answer. So this is a different kind of computation where it's taking something that's very difficult to calculate with an infinite potential number of answers, and then through a process of elimination, it gets to what probabilistically is the right answer. But the way and the reason it's powerful is the bits in a classical computer are a bit like a light switch. They're ones and zeros. You've seen them like maybe in the movie The Matrix or somewhere else. See the ones and zeros. It's binary code. But quantum computers operate in a third state of existence. So if we think of classical computer like a light switch, it's an on and off. Think of a quantum computer as like a light switch with a dimmer, and it has a wider range of potential outcomes. That provides exponential processing power. You're taking the number of bits and you're calculating what kind of processing power you have. it's a lot more powerful. And that's going to help a lot of businesses do all kinds of calculations they hadn't previously thought of. And it'll be very valuable in physical science, in material science, and in finance. So that's what I see as what's next. I see more expansion of AI in lots of different areas. And then I see quantum computing taking things to a next level.
Okay, so thinking about that future of AI, let's
Sure.
ask you this sort of open-ended question, see where you want to go with it. But ultimately, what keeps you up at night?
I am most concerned that we become overly reliant on the technology and that companies just run with it. Like I said, on the operational risk, if you're just running with it and you don't have any quality control, you don't have any training, you don't have any education outside of that, that essentially we just let the computer do all the work for us. And especially in the education system, if we're not careful on how we test people to make sure they can do it without the computer, we end up with a lot of people who just hit return all the time, and we lose the ability to take what's human and improve what's AI with that. In the same way that the dumbed down articles that are written that lack any kind of anecdotes, humor, any kind of personality, those things are sad. But if we add the human elements, they're a lot better. We need to make sure that we have control over what we're getting in that respect and the quality of the output. The risk is, what happens if everybody just says, never mind. Never mind. We don't need to really teach our kids. We don't need to really test them. We don't need to test or train our new employees. We're all just going to hit return all day. And eventually I'll just train the computer to hit return on its own. Like those people, those engineers who created little robots that could just automatically swipe right on the dating apps for them all day long. We'll just do that to just hit return on all the work we're doing. And I just don't even need to do anything. And I think that's where we'd see a tremendous loss. That's what keeps me up at night. If we take this opportunity for productivity gains and instead everything gets dumbed down and quality goes down and we lose the ability to take what is human and do even more and better things.
So other side of the coin, what would you say you're most optimistic about as it relates to the future of AI?
I am really optimistic about the potential for AI to be a productivity lever, to help employees do more, to help companies do more, to help businesses grow faster. I think we're going to see a lot more solopreneurs running 7-8-figure businesses. I think you're going to see an ability for small businesses to grow more rapidly than they ever have before because of their ability to scale by using technology that allows them to grow certain functions that they may otherwise have been slowed down growing. That's where I see tremendous potential. And that, of course, is potential not just in private companies, but in public companies across the whole economy, in the same way that what was the benefit of us having the internet or computers, right, in the first place? What was the benefit in finance of having Lotus 1-2-3 or Excel? What is the benefit now to mid-office, back office, and various functions of having the ability to have ChatGPT and other AI as levers of growth and output? That's what I'm most optimistic about. But we still need to control for the quality piece. But that growth potential, that upside, that's across the whole economy.
Well, I think that's all we have time for today, Jason. We'll leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Very
Jonathan. It's
insightful.
been great to be here with you.
Really appreciate the time.
Oh,
And
thank
for
you.
our audience, really appreciate you joining us today. I think we're all very optimistic about the future. Thank you for your confidence in American Century Investment.